Hi there and welcome to part 2 of the series of 5 webinars produced by DrinkWise AgeWell. This part of the webinar will look at what we know works in services for older adults. These webinars contain lots of learning from the DrinkWise AgeWell programme and are split into the following 5 sections to enable you to watch and listen at your leisure. So part 1, why consider older adults in services? So this will look at an overview of the evidence and need for specific services for older adults. Part 2, what works in services for older adults, and this will look at what did we learn about best practice. Part 3, the experience. So this will look at our experts by experience and we'll hear them talk about what was important and supported them. Part 4, women in alcohol. So this is an open and honest discussion about alcohol and being a woman. Part 5, alcohol and ageing. So this will look at practical tips to think about alcohol in your life.
What works? The second part of our webinar series will draw out the key learning of what works in approach and practice when supporting older adults who are drinking. As we go through, we will refer to the findings of the contribution analysis which was carried out by our academic partners. The contribution analysis helps to assess the impact of programmes where changes are likely to be the result of multiple contributory factors. The aim of contribution analysis is to produce a credible, evidence-based narrative of contribution that a reasonable person would be likely to agree with, rather than to produce conclusive proof. These findings give us the confidence to say what works with older adults who need support with drinking. And as we go through, you'll see our golden nuggets of learning on the screen. At the heart of the holistic DrinkWise AgeWell programme was direct engagement offered in different forms. One-to-one support was available for an initial period of 6 weeks, but this was flexible and person-centred, and individuals could have support for longer and return for further support if they needed it. The response time was quick from referral to the first contact and appointment for support. This allowed us to work with individuals at the point they had decided to make changes to their alcohol use, which some refer to as the moment of clarity, the mirror moment, or the kick. We also offered group support in the form of age-specific and alcohol-specific mutual partnership groups. These groups were safe, non-judgmental spaces which offered support to adults over 50. They did not require those attending to be abstinent. Indeed, often those who attended commented on how non-judgmental and supportive the groups were if they hadn't managed to stick to their plan. This peer support was a really important feature of how they ran. Family groups also ran in some areas, and they were the only part of the programme that wasn't age-specific. They offered support using 5-step and craft interventions to family members and concerned others who were impacted by someone's drinking. These offered structured, non-judgmental support through regular group meetings. The contribution analysis on the impact of family groups demonstrated that there was a 46% reduction in family burden. Family burden is a measure of a combination of the negative impact of a problem, family members' physical and mental well-being, and styles of coping normally associated with stress and strain. So I'm now going to go on and talk about what was our key learning that works in direct engagement for older adults who need support around their drinking. This was more accessible to older adults who were often new to alcohol services and could be experiencing embarrassment, shame, or stigma around their increase in alcohol use and having to seek services. It was also important to work alongside someone to look at what was going on for them and not focus only on their alcohol use. For age-onset drinkers who have increased their drinking in response to age-specific events, often if the wider issues are dealt with, then the alcohol use begins to diminish and resolve. And the key workers often accompanied them to different appointments from different services. This holistic, person-centred, age-specific approach is key to a high level of engagement and retention of older adults, and also included age-sensitive screenings and assessments and being able to identify age-related motivating factors. Ensuring staff values and training in age-sensitive practice meant that the service offered positivity that older adults are not too old to change, and offered encouragement and hope, which reflects the evidence that older adults will make positive and sustained changes. The service challenged stigma and was non-judgmental and recognised positive ageing. This is reflected in the contribution analysis, where older adults with alcohol problems said that they had more self-esteem and experience less shame and self-blame as a result of their involvement with DrinkWise Age Well. The contribution analysis of the impact of this support for adults over 50 was that the majority decreased their alcohol consumption and more than half were drinking within the UK recommended guidelines of 14 units a week on exit from the service. Now I'm going to talk about two areas that were also really important when working with the older cohort of the population around alcohol use that we took into account in assessment and support in age-sensitive practice. The first of these is alcohol-related cognitive impairment, ARCI. This is an underdiagnosed condition and one that has good statistics for recovery. It's something that individuals are at risk of after several years of dependent drinking at higher levels. Older adults with cognitive impairment are no more likely to drop out of treatment or have poorer outcomes. And there are significant improvements seen in cognitive function after receiving support. So ARCI is an underdiagnosed condition and one that has good statistics for recovery. To pick up on this, we use the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, the MOCA. This is the gold standard for picking up on the damage done to the brain due to alcohol. It's a 30-item scale designed to detect cognitive impairment and has been found effective in identifying this amongst people who misuse alcohol and also drugs, as well as being validated for use amongst older adults. All DrinkWise Age Well key workers were trained in its use. You can train and register to use it online. Memory was an important part of the one-to-one process, and the MOCA was used routinely as part of the assessment at the start and end of engagement, and as part of our age-sensitive screening. By doing this, we were able to catch indications of ARCI earlier and help to take away fear and anxiety about memory issues. You may expect that there would be a reluctance to be tested on memory. However, feedback from individuals was that they were happy to be screened and used words like reassurance, understanding, knowledge is power. By doing this and catching ARCI earlier, we were able to offer onward referral and signposting for memory-related issues. ARCI is also useful to consider in individuals using a service who may not be engaging. ARC impacts in the parts of the brain that are needed for motivation and memory, which are both important if individuals are to engage and make changes. And it can also be helpful for families to understand ARCI because there is additional stigma around it for families and a lack of support. The second thing that is important to consider when working with older adults is medication. Older people are more likely to be taking prescribed medication and often more than one. Research by Age UK in 2019 called More Harm Than Good found that 1 in 10 over 65s are taking at least 8 medications per week. And by the time they reach 85, this is 1 in 4. And this will often be alongside over-the-counter as and when medications, such as paracetamol and ibuprofen, which are often prescribed for pain control to be taken as needed. So it's important to consider when working with older adults that we think about medication and raise awareness of the potential for interaction between medication and alcohol, as very often individuals may not be aware of this. This includes impact on the liver. A combination of medication with alcohol can put increased stress on the liver, which means that some medications may not work as effectively or indeed can have an enhancing effect. It can also make conditions worse or not have an impact, or allow their medication not to have an impact. Finally, we need to consider the assumptions that may be made by older patients by prescribers, such as she's never been a drinker. And as we already know, older adults may not want to be labelled as a drinker. So what you get is a situation where the patient won't tell if they're worried about an increase in alcohol use, and the prescriber won't ask about alcohol use. So this leaves us with a hidden population of older adults who may be at risk from the mix of medication and alcohol. So from this, awareness raising and speaking to individuals about this and the impact of their drinking with medication is very important, and encouraging them to speak to prescribers to ensure that they're not at risk. The next part of this webinar will now go on to look at the other areas of the programme.
Prevention, campaigns, partnership working and training. Our prevention work with individuals was set in the context of work within the wider community to empower individuals to understand the impact of alcohol on the older body and the risks. And this was done by prevention teams working in settings all across the community. Our campaigns helped raise the profile of age-specific topics such as menopause, driving, stigma. Our training worked with professionals who would come into contact with older adults in any setting, with the aim of increasing confidence about the issues for older adults and alcohol, and give them the skills to confidently have the conversation about their alcohol use. The contribution analysis on our training impact showed that 9,000 professionals attended training. And from that practice, change included asking about alcohol use on admission to hospital, being more aware of hidden signs, more aware of... So going back to talking about the prevention work in particular, the key points about our kind of prevention stalls and how we went about raising awareness were having that kind of accessible and acceptable manner when we were in community settings, about being able to translate units and simplify health messages, being able to enable recipients of this information to identify with the risks associated with alcohol use in older adults, being able to promote a level of increased insight and behaviour change, but also be able to pass on understanding to friends and family as well. And very basically just have that kind of staff manner and visual appeal. And when we talk about where do we do this, we really tried to kind of embed ourselves and link in with every aspect of the community in which we worked. So this often involved, engaging with libraries, sports centres, local community groups, local employers, festivals, food festivals, pride festivals, anything that we really kind of felt would allow us to engage with different groups of people within the community. And when we did this, we were able to offer screenings and ABIs as well, alcohol brief interventions. And when I mention an ABI, this is a use of the Audit C, which is a shortened version of the alcohol use disorders identification test, which would then be followed by a kind of short, structured harm reduction conversation as well. And the impact of this was that, you can see some of the stats that are up on the screen, that 61% of people scored positively. And following that, 43% of these people said they intended to make changes to their drinking following this brief intervention. So that's, again, quite significant statistics to back up the way that we went around doing this. And the contribution analysis on the impact of this type of screening says that several studies show that screening and brief interventions are effective in reducing alcohol consumption in hazardous and harmful drinkers. Up on the screen shows a really good example of a campaign that we run through DrinkWise Age Well. And this was not only a national campaign, but was delivered through the medium of social media. So this is our Vintage Street campaign. And it was an example of a social media campaign that aimed to increase awareness around the reasons why alcohol use increases in later life, and also look to reduce stigma around this type of issue. Regarding the impact of this campaign, 700%, there was a 700% increase in over 65s visiting the DrinkWise Age Well website. 83% of people who saw the campaign are now more likely to believe that society should treat older adults with alcohol problems with a more tolerant attitude. 71% of who identified with characters in the video intended to make changes to the amount they drink. And 84% of people are now more aware of the link between alcohol and cancer since watching the video. So again, quite striking statistics to back up going about a campaign in this type of way. And the contribution analysis on the impact of using wider media use shows that whilst the efficacy of media and information strategies in isolation on alcohol-related harms is not strong, there is evidence that it increases help seeking. Now, just to move on to talk a little bit about partnership working, it is very much important to work with partners in a variety of settings to raise awareness around the issues of alcohol in older adults. So we really sought to kind of diversify and engage with different groups of people by making those important partnership links. Resilience and connectedness. Our resilience workstream could be seen as the natural end of an individual's journey through DrinkWise Age Well. And the idea behind it was that individuals would be able to kind of learn the skills and the tools to be able to maintain the changes that came through engagement with the service, but on a more long-term basis. And looking at the cycle of change model, what we really hope to do is give individual those final tools to try and move on past those kind of relapse and lapse stages in that cycle. It also sought to highlight resilience as a form of prevention and recognize that loneliness and isolation can be a big part of why older adults may start to drink or indeed start to drink more. Our resilience activities were many and varied and provided opportunities for some of the things that we've got up on the screen here. Social connections, and when I say this, I refer to examples such as the Spoon Cafe in Glasgow, mindfulness craft classes, guided walking groups, indoor curling, as is demonstrated on the screen there. Any opportunity really that could be provided for adults who are over 50 to come together and interact socially, really. And this was very much cultivated on an asset-based community development type of approach by approaching community leaders and those who wish to get involved and using their opinions and their input to co-produce these groups, so that we were really developing opportunities with people rather than doing it to them, so to speak. As well as the social connections groups, we also had more structured groups which offered opportunities for skills development in avenues such as the LiveWise Age Well course that we developed. Now, this was a 6-session intervention that was very much designed upon giving the individuals taking part that kind of toolkit for resilience that they could take forward and make use of. And when I say toolkit, I'm talking about skills like problem solving, mindfulness, and goal setting, and all those type of. And they were also community engagers who were assertive members of the community, and we really sought to give them a voice with their own point of view that people would be able to listen to. On a wider level, this approach aimed to tackle stigma by normalizing groups and taking them out of the service setting and moving them into the community. This offered an alternative to that drinking social life and an alternative to the pub as well. And just to give you a couple of examples of some of the feedback that we've received from individuals taking part in such activities, it really sought to give individuals a sense of purpose and improve, kind of mental well-being and mental health as well, which we know from our research as being some of the kind of core triggers and core factors that can increase or exacerbate individuals drinking in this cohort. Lastly, on this subject of resilience, I just wanted to give you some more of that kind of feedback on the data that we had. And as you can see from the screen, there's a substantial amount of people engaged with the resilience workstream across all of the demonstration areas. And we really saw increases in these areas that were tackling those triggers that I've just mentioned that can increase people's drinking habits. So that was a really positive thing to have fed back to us. But also importantly to mention at this point, the contribution analysis of the impact of our resilience work shows that among those who attended social activities and who consumed alcohol, 38% said their alcohol consumption had decreased as a result of that, which again is very heartening when we're talking about the information coming back on this type of working.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to part 2 of our webinar. Please move on to part 3 to hear from our experts by experience. You can also find out more information on our website, which is www.drinkwiseagewell.org.uk, including details of our alcohol helpline for older adults. This helpline is for over 50s and provides free and confidential support around about the issue of alcohol. If you would like to check if your service is doing the best it can for older adults who are drinking, then please take a look at our Age Inclusive Model Service Toolkit, which walks you through ensuring your service and support is accessible for all ages and stages in life. It contains lots of helpful tips and information and allows you to rate your own service against checklists and standards that have been created in co-production with older adults.